Welcome to Career in Progress, a podcast about building the skills that build your career. In this episode, I'll dive into essential skills and share insights to level up your career. If you're just starting out, learn how to stand out in interviews, how to stay curious and grow from a thriving technologist into an inspiring technical leader. For those stepping into leadership, here are tips on navigating through difficult conversations, building a culture of experimentation in the AI era, and creating high performing, globally diverse teams, and much more. With no further ado, I introduce my insightful and amazing guest, Sriram Subramanian. An accomplished engineering leader with over 28 years of experience in building top-tier software products, Sriram currently is the R&D Head India at Endor Labs. He's led global teams at top companies including Citrix, Netskope, and Juniper Networks. Sriram is known for blending startup agility and enterprise rigor. He is also a published author of two books on OpenStack Networking, OpenStack Networking Cookbook, and Software Defined Network (SDN) with OpenStack, and maintains an active blog at cloudbuilder.in where he shares insights on cloud computing, SaaS applications, AI, and leadership, making him the perfect guest on this episode of Career in Progress. Sriram, welcome to Career in Progress, a podcast about building the skills that build your career. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks, Purnima. Thanks for having me.
Sriram, we have known each other for a very long time. We went to school together and we were friends then. I am so grateful that we've stayed great friends since. Over the years, we've had some fun conversations, silly conversations, and some really serious conversations as well. The one skill that has stood out to me throughout your journey is curiosity. You have always been the one to ask why. I see that transition into your career. You have a solid 28 years of career
Yep.
at
Yes.
this point, which is wow, amazing. Congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And over the years, you become a writer. You have patents. You have, you write avidly on LinkedIn. You're always curious about learning, and you're always curious about asking why.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Help me understand and help me, what are some of the ways in which you bring this to work? And what are some of the ways you keep your curiosity going and learning going?
Perfect. Thanks, Purnima. So curiosity is also about why not. Sometimes it's not just why. So I ask
I
both the
love that.
questions. Why not also? And what happens is, especially at work, when you do engineering in India, when you study, and when you come into the corporate side, when you start working, you will find things to be very different from what you studied typically. And if you want to succeed, you need to have that inquisitive mindset where you are ready to ask questions, you are ready to explore new things and then grow. Right. So from the very early stages, when even at the first job, I got the first job through campus interviews, and they just put you in a team. I was in the testing team, and I was not enjoying what I was doing. Then I saw some of my friends who went through the same campus recruitment, but they got into coding and development. I started helping them to see what are they really doing, and somehow I started liking it. And that's when I first changed my job, saying that what, I'm going to pursue what I like, right? And then the trigger for that was just helping out a friend who was trying to code and solve a problem. And testing at the time was mostly manual, less automation, and I wanted to explore and see what are the others guys doing. Let me see if I enjoy something else. And that's when steadily that experiment of why not and why kept on with me. So after 4 or 5 years of work, one thing I knew, I always had good communication skills. It's it, some of these things friends tell you, your family members sometimes tell you that you have good communication skills. So I wanted to get into management. I always wanted to grow into the management side. So the first opportunity that came across I grabbed it. I said, hey, I want to become manager. It's like 5, 6 years out of college, first managerial job. And
Yep.
again, it's not easy. Many people struggle with manager. I've had a case very recently where a very strong engineer wanted to become manager, then gave up after a year, right? So, but then I went on to the management side, and I have been ever since doing that as a role, and I have figured out what needs to be done. Even that is a journey. Just like people learn programming and they learn new technologies, on the managerial side, you need to constantly develop yourself. And if you're not curious about what motivates people, what drives people, what helps people grow, it's very hard to succeed in that role. So you have to have that mindset of constantly trying to figure out what can I do better, and that's what eventually curiosity helps you do it.
So I heard, wow, that was so amazing to hear. You talk about what works and what does not, why and why
I'm
not.
not.
And I love that, that having the both are equally important. You talked about you knew communication was a strength of yours, and
Yeah.
you have in your tenure seen and coached many people to get there.
Mhm.
What are a couple of tangible skills that you would say as technologist, and the example you shared, right? Somebody who's a technologist, who's a strong performer, and typically they are candidates for promotion. As an
Everywhere.
HR leader, I see it time and again,
Yeah.
right? And some of them, really enjoy
Hmm.
moving to a more leadership role, but some of them struggle,
Hmm.
right? As somebody who's aspiring technologist who's looking to move to a people leadership role,
Hmm.
what would be one or two or a couple of tangible skills you would say they should build? I heard the why and why not, which is
Correct.
curiosity,
Hmm.
curiosity about technology, which they
Hmm.
have,
Hmm.
curiosity about people,
Yep.
understanding what recognition would mean to them. I heard that in
Correct.
your conversation. What would be some of the other skills that you would say, hey, as you are moving from point A to point B in your journey, that you should think about?
So I think the especially I can since I've been on the management leadership side, I would speak from that side. And in my opinion, the very simple skill, and actually it's very hard, and many people read about it but ignore it, is that helps really helps in your growth on the leadership side, is connecting people's work to the company's goals. Most often people want to know how, what is, they're looking for meaning to their work. Everybody will say you should look for meaningful work, you should do, you should try strive to work in a good environment and things like that, but nobody really connects the dots. For many people, you will really have a very happy team when you as a leader can connect their day-to-day work and how it impacts the team. As it impacts the team, impacts the company, to the company goals. You need to connect all the way back to the company goals. And that's, again, like I said, it's a very simple, I don't know if I should call it a skill, but there is, to achieve that, you need a whole lot of underlying skills, right? Which is, and
I love
for
that.
example,
Yep.
if you're working in a public company, right, a publicly listed company, every quarter there will be a company results which are announced public. There's tons of public information. You are working 5 levels below. How do you see your work result in, say, $5 billion revenue? It's very hard to see. And the what happens in large companies after the company results are announced, there are all hands, the slides, same old slides are shared everywhere, but nobody is able to connect that back to the people. So you need finance skills, to be honest. You need business skills, and this is something I learned in I went to the business school, did some courses deliberately for this particular purpose, to say that how do I interpret the business results and how can I connect them back to my team's work. So that, for example, those are all the underlying skills. And obviously communication helps every single place, how to communicate that to an engineer who's 2 years out of college, then explain to them that this is how their work helps, and connect back to the company goal. So in my opinion, figuring out in your own environment how you can help your team members connect their day-to-day work back to the company's success is the key, and that will create
I
a
love.
very positive
Go
atmosphere
ahead.
for everyone.
I love what you said. Help me give an example, a tangible example. And you talked about your team members at different levels,
Hmm.
right? And some of them have that business
Correct.
acumen. Some are too early in their career to understand.
Yep.
What would that career conversation
Hmm.
with you look like for somebody who does not have that much tenure yet, How do you help
Correct.
them connect that to the purpose? And you're absolutely right. We are all about sense of belonging, sense of purpose.
Mhm.
And how do you bring that to an employee early in their career?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question again. So you have to look at the kind of work they are doing, and usually it will fall into a few buckets. You're probably building a product or a feature in a product for a certain set of customer. You have competition in that business area which you're competing with, or you're doing some new innovative idea which you're bringing to the market, and you have to figure out, hey, how do I take this brand new idea which is not, it's not easy to compare. So you have to observe and figure out what work somebody is doing, and then connect it back to the company's results and company's focus. Almost always there will be I'm talking about, it's easy to give examples of public companies, but pretty much same holds good for startup like mine, where we obviously don't share our results outside our company, but within the company we talk about revenues, we talk about innovation, we talk about things that will help us in the future in terms of revenue. So many innovative ideas that team members are working today may not be tied to a business revenue as of today or in this quarter, but 2 quarters down the line, there should be enough information for them to connect to some revenue, some potential upside for that work. So that's one way for, especially for people who are just writing code, who do not have a business background, who are building features, you connect with them. If you're working on a product or a feature which has a very direct connect to the revenue, yes, you cannot quantify, did I contribute $1 million out of $1 billion? No, you can't do that, but you can still very easily connect with the public information that, hey, this particular revenue that's captured in the quarterly result, you contributed to it because you worked on a feature which was needed by this customer, and these customers fall into this particular bucket of top 10% of customers. There are a lot of pointers, but these, again, connecting these dots is the extra skill on you need to develop, and how to do that comes from business knowledge, finance knowledge, and things like that. Make
I
sense?
love how you absolutely. I think what you broke down and how I'm. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention I am taking notes. I'm
Sure.
always about, so I have my
Paper and pen.
trusted pen with me. Of course, I'm a traditionalist, and
Yeah.
my trusted notebook, which I call my learning manual, and I'm taking notes in it. Such incredible notes in it from your insights, Sriram. I think where it really, rang a bell for me is you talked about purpose of people and then the purpose of company and connecting to the financial goals and keeping the outside in perspective at all
Right.
times,
Yep.
right? And that is very different for a publicly traded company, that's very
Yep.
different for a startup. I think what stood out to me is keeping that purpose in mind and connecting the dots for somebody who is learning how to connect the dots.
Correct.
For example, an intern who started, somebody who's
Yeah.
started, and where should they even start? What are some of the things you do
Yeah.
every day to stay connected?
Correct. So I think if you look at it from an intern's perspective, they need to be, again, back to the curiosity. They should be curious enough to ask questions. They should be asking their managers and team members that, hey, what the work that you have given me, what does it mean? Why? How is it important to you? Right. I think that's the key part. I'll give a very, very specific example. We have interns right now, and they are doing some work which we have assigned to them. And many companies I have worked, interns are given sort of work which is not critical, low risk. If they do it, great. If they don't do it, no problem, kind of a thing. But we have actually given work which is critical. We have given feature development. Yes, we may not need the feature right away. We can take time, but it is as good a feature that we would ask any experienced developers to build. But we give them more time. If we usually go for 6-month interns, but keeping that aside, if a seasoned developer takes 1 month to do it, we are okay if the interns takes 3 months to do it, right? But give them same challenging work, and then make them realize what are we trying to build here. In that 3 months, they need to ask the questions, and you need to help them answer that this feature is just like any other feature other experienced developers build. You are just taking longer because you are new to it, right? Now that's from an intern's perspective. From a manager's perspective, this the same thing holds good for regular employees, full-time employees, experienced engineer, even senior most engineers,
I
most
love that. Yeah.
experienced architects. They
To
will
ask
want to know.
questions.
Yeah, they will know how to ask questions, but they will still want to know what can I do to help the company. You need to bounce ideas with them. You need to be on your toes. That's where the curiosity part helps, that you read enough and you're staying ahead of the game a little bit, so that senior most technical leads and architects and CTOs can talk to you. You can bounce ideas with them, right? So that's where it comes. And now when they bounce ideas and when they see that, yes, I am working on something critical for the company, not at a single feature level. Now I'm working on something which is going to give direction to the whole business. They will be, challenged. They will be excited about it. They'll be motivated about it. So as a manager, you need to know real low level details to high level details. Now, how do you do it? Partly, yeah, that's your job. So you'll know over time, learn how to do it. But you need the fundamental skills. You definitely need to know certain amount of business savviness, business awareness. Read carefully, or listen carefully to all hands. Read carefully the public statements, publicly announced results. You have to spend time to analyze and understand the business aspects very clearly. Ultimately, everything revolves around what value each and every employee is adding to the business. So you need to have the ears on the ground from the company perspective, from competition perspective, a lot of things. If you are fully aware of it, you will be able to guide, you will be able to communicate everyone's and connect everybody's goals and their work back to the business.
I love what you said, and I heard so many skills in what you said. So, for people leaders, always make time to learn beyond your role. Be curious to learn about the industry, about the competitors. That's one. The second, be curious to know about what motivates your employee and connect with them at the level where they can follow through and they can understand.
Yep.
Three,
Yep.
set clarity between the big goals and be strategic, but at the same time also be tactical to break it down into execution. Four, be open to questions. Sometimes, questions can be an uncomfortable place to be in.
Yep.
And, you can be like, I don't know, or, why are you asking me that, right? So be
Yeah.
open to questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, you were saying
very
something.
interesting thought on the I don't know part, and again, very surprisingly, it happened very recently. And now with AI, if I don't know, there is yet another tool available to help you find answers. And again, I'm giving you a very specific example. I was talking to a very senior engineer, very very experienced engineer. He asked a very open-ended question, saying, "Hey, with all these things that are happening, industry, AI, do you think we as a company we should expand? Look at new areas?" Right? It's a hard question. I don't have an answer. I'm not going to call up the CEO and CTO and ask that question immediately. But I went to AI. I went to Gemini in this case, and hey, Gemini, here is my company information, publicly available information. Here are some things I've observed in the industry. Can you tell me some interesting areas where my senior engineers can focus on, which could be help grow the business? And AI came up with some interesting answers. I'm not saying it is a good answer or bad, but you no longer have you can say no, but there are tools to get you better answers than no now. And in fact, I instead of giving the whole response, I asked my senior engineer, "Hey, here's the prompt I use. Why don't you try the same prompt? Try to get your own answers.
I
Help
love
them
that.
find answers." I think that's the change AI is helping. But in summary, that's the job. You have to answer. You have to help people do their things better, clarify questions, clarify answers. Give clarifying answers to their questions.
I love that you said, teach people how to fish.
Great,
That
exactly.
is going to be an important skill. Thank you for being vulnerable to share real examples. And I really liked the way you also not only did that for yourself, but coached your
Yeah,
team. So I think that is going to be a critical part,
exactly.
especially as we get into a more AI accelerated era, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
Uh, I'm curious, Sriram, as you are, working so closely with AI, and you are working so closely with people and purpose of AI and the technologies and people side. As you look at both the sides,
Mhm.
what are some of the leadership skills that are going to be critical to be successful in the AI era? What should the leaders be doing? As we are in a strange time where the
Mhm.
technology is evolving possibly as
Yeah.
fast as we are evolving,
Yeah.
right? And this is not an everyday challenge we've seen in our
Yeah.
journeys. It's a historic moment in some ways in our technology careers. What would
Correct.
your advice to leaders be as they embark this unique challenge of bringing people along in the journey of AI, and what should they be focusing on?
Yeah, it's not an easy question because the answer really is it depends. But there is something again I can give you some
Hmm.
very. This is something I wanted to post on LinkedIn. Also, I didn't get a chance. We recently Endor Labs, where I work right now, we recently announced some AI related products and initiatives. And what I do know for sure is we took our time. We took our time,
Mm,
carefully curated some solutions, not jump into doing something with AI just because everybody's doing.
I
So,
love
and
that.
I personally felt that's a good strategy. Again, this is my view. We have been using AI internally. We have been experimenting with it, but we took time to pick and choose ideas that really made sense, right?
Mm.
And we have what we are encouraging even more even now is how do our employees get to experiment with AI? What all can they build? The product that we build, the platform that we have, is cyber security for developers. You can say, in some sense, software supply chain security. There's a developer element to it. So I am encouraging my developers to
Mm-hmm.
experiment with AI a whole lot more. So that's one. So I think you need to let that happen, and not just developers. My recruiters who has never written code are using AI to automate Google Sheets. So we are in a Google
Wow.
ecosystem, and Google has a lot of interesting automation. And my HR team, recruitment team, has done some very nice automation just by asking AI some questions.
Yeah.
Interesting things that how AI can be leveraged. And now what that does is constantly makes the team think and try to adopt the right technologies, try to see AI with a different lens. There is a lot of hype for sure. There is a lot of hype. You will see equal amount of criticisms for AI as well as the success stories. But it's up to the individuals and the teams and their leadership to encourage the experimentation right now and have an open mind. And my personal belief is, as of now, it's a very, very, very good tool to help you do our jobs, for sure. And will it impact more jobs in the future? I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. I think that's for the future to see. I think there will be some challenges. I would be very surprised if they are not. But if you really experiment and learn to solve problems with AI, you will develop a muscle which will help you go through this whole, AI transition that the world is going to go through.
I love the examples you gave of where you're applying AI, and one thing I have heard from our conversation from the start to now is the word experiment and
Yeah.
be agile, right?
Hmm.
I heard you say that in your previous comment
Yeah.
about having the interns actually do some
Yeah.
very critical work
Hmm.
versus day-to-day work.
Yeah.
And then you talked about experimentation with HR. That's
Hmm.
amazing.
Hmm.
And experimentation with employees in each and every role in your
Hmm.
company. How do you create an environment of experimentation, and how do you create an environment of failure?
Hmm.
Because experimentation can many times have failures, and you said this very eloquently, which
Yeah.
is not to chase after the shiny objects. Test it, try it. Just don't be like, wow, because X and Y is doing it,
Yep.
we got to do it. But validate it. Again, be
Yep.
curious, why not? But
Correct.
all of this in reality
Yep.
has an element of failure to it, right?
Correct.
How do you create that environment of failure,
Correct.
and how do you reward in some ways, even when people fail? How do you have
Yeah.
that conversation? What does that psychological safety
Hmm.
look like in your company? I would be
Yeah.
curious to know.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think even before the success and failure, the biggest challenge is how much time and a company is
i
willing to
i
allow
love that.
employees, right? So
Yes.
it's very easy. Google made it very famous. 20% of your time is allow, experiments and stuff. But let's be honest. I mean, if let's say I'm in a cybersecurity company and I'm using my 20% to build a gaming app or a fintech app, my company is not going to see it nicely. I mean, nobody's expecting you or asking you to experiment with something totally out of the box. Yeah, there will be some tolerance, but beyond a point, people will say, okay, if you're doing all these things, why don't you do something else, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have to channel the teams to experiment on relevant things. So that's the first thing.
Mm.
Second thing is you have to be honest, really honest with them. And I have this conversation with my one-on-ones and my team meetings and stuff that these are all things, the way I connect this, I've done it in one-on-one more easily is say you are getting paid to do a certain job, right? You're learning as part of the job, which is your little bit of a bonus, you can say. But assuming everybody is paid fairly, you do some job, which is building a product for a company. It's not the experimentation part. This is what you do in, day out. You deliver features, you code, you do things. You are being paid for it. Anything that you learn in the process is already a bonus. The next level bonus is your experimentation. You learn through it. The company will eventually benefit from your learning, but you need to spend time. Now, we as a company give 10% typically to allow people to think, but I am honest with them
Nice.
saying that you need to spend some extra hours outside work. It's not going to happen otherwise. You have to be real. It some time has to be spent. It's very hard to do everything in that exact 9 to 5, or unless if you people assume that it is all coming from office time. It's not the case. You have to go beyond. You have to be honest. I'm not saying people work all weekends, but I've seen cases where engineers are on a very good track. They have this flow mode going on. They tend to work beyond regular hours, and many times we work outside hours for whatever reasons. They have to use sometimes that time to do some experiments. So when you stretch the total time, then 10 to 15% you will find it's this extra work which is not directly tied to your work, but you will learn, you will experiment, and if nothing comes out of it, there is no loss from a business perspective. But for the employees, you connect back to saying that, hey, what did you learn? Ultimately, did you learn something? As long as you have learned something, it's a net gain. There's no loss. It's never a loss when you're experimenting technically. So that's the main part. You have to be honest with them that, hey, sometimes you have to stretch and do. Maybe it's spilling over the weekend. Sometimes you have time. There are times in a project's life cycle where people have some room to do certain things. So you have to be flexible. You have to be honest about it, that not everything is going to be black and white. That, hey, I work 4 days a week, fifth day I'm experimenting. No, it doesn't work that way.
I like the honesty there, right? Time.
Yeah.
Time is always a constraint, and it's really hard to even time box and say. And there are moments in our business cycle when you are completely focused on something, and there are moments in your business cycle where you have more waiting time and then you invest more. So I really love the honesty of two things, which is one, we give you structured time to experiment and be
We
curious,
augment it. Yeah.
keep on learning, and there is no net loss
Correct.
to learning. I love the encouragement there. What happens when somebody experimented with something and that did not work out? And how does how does the person's performance evaluated on that? How
Yeah. So,
does you,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
It's like a stretch goal, right? When you have a stretch goal, if you meet a stretch goal, you celebrate. If you don't meet a stretch goal, you learn and move on. There is no impact to anybody's performance. It's agreed upon. In fact, we don't even so we do structured hackathons in every year, so which people participate. Winners get a token award, but others don't. They're not dinged on anything, nothing like it. Like I said, there is no negative, thing associated by not experimenting or an unsuccessful experiment.
I love the fact that you actually have a structure for experimentation, which is
Yeah,
through stretch goals, right?
correct.
Agreed upon stretch goals. And that's what I want to highlight from your,
Yeah,
what you shared with us, which is experiments are always encouraged. And experiments are things that give people motivation, but many times they're not things which are rewarded. And people sometimes get scared, which is like, oh, should I be doing it? Should I
yeah,
not be doing it? So it's really, I think, a good way of putting structure and rigor around it through setting stretch goals and having regular conversations around it and adjusting it as you go and being flexible about it and being real about it. I
correct.
think that is what I heard from what you
Yep,
shared. Is that the right
exactly.
summary?
Perfect.
Yep. Awesome. Sriram, I want to switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
You've had a fantastic tenure of creating high performing teams in top technology companies, and you have embarked on a startup. You are the R&D Head India at Endor Labs, a Series B security startup, and both of them are quite different in the way you work. Where the larger companies
Yeah.
like Citrix and Juniper, where you've had successful careers in,
Mhm.
have a much more structured approach to things.
Mhm.
A startup requires a different approach.
Mhm.
There are many people who want to be the next Sriram Subramanian, who are leading large teams, global
Mhm.
teams in a big company and want to think
Mhm.
about a startup. What are some of the skills that you would encourage them to build as they bring their dream
Sure.
of a startup to life?
Oh, it's a uh, good question, but it'll require a very elaborate answer. I'll try to see how best I can summarize. The common theme, though, I feel there is a common theme between large companies and small companies, and that is the drive. You need to have a drive to do things. In larger companies, you know, you will have challenges with people, a lot more challenges with people. You will have large teams. I've had a case situation where there were a whole lot of senior directors and super experienced people reporting to me, and they have they their background, their experience, makes them think in a certain way, whereas the company and the business unit wanted to go in a different direction. So you have to push them hard in a very different way. With senior people, you can have very, very honest conversations. You have to be brutal. It's not easy, but you need to set very clear goals, be very brutal about those goals, and let them do their job, and try to make sure they are doing their job as quickly as possible. If not, actions have to be taken, right? Same in a similar way in a startup, you have to roll up your sleeves. You have to do whatever it takes to get things done, right? I used to joke, I've forgotten how many people I've interviewed for Endor Labs in India. I just don't even remember. What I do know is every single interview of every single role I have been part of. So I don't know the
Wow.
number. It's probably crossed thousands now, but it's
Yeah.
a lot. But one thing I tell everyone, what I enjoy in a startup is every small bit of work that you do makes a difference. There was a time when I was ordering coffee, for the 4 or 5 team members. We had a new office, very small group, brand new office. What blend of coffee to order? It makes a difference. Some coffees blends make people happy. Some coffee blends people are not happy. And I realized that even that makes a difference. Right. We used to go every Friday for a team lunch, and where I take the team out for lunch, what food we order, every bit makes a difference. So that's true for both large and small companies. What I'm trying to say is you need to have the drive in both the cases to do not, continuously do what is needed to be done. The challenges are different, but having the drive is very important. Two, you have to know your own role. You have to be very clear about what your contribution is going to be, which means you need to work with your manager, your leadership team, with clarity that, hey, this is what I'm going to focus on. Right. I have initially when Endor Labs started, I did not have any managers. I could not code. I was hiring, I was setting up an office. So I can only do limited amount of technical overseeing of, what my team members are doing. So I had to rely on the engineers that they were doing their job. I cannot be hands-on into the weeds at all, right? So you need to know what your goals are, and your leadership cannot hold you accountable for things that you don't even have time for. So those clarity of setting up your own goals with your leadership team about what you're going to be focusing on, what does success look like in the next 2 months, 1 month, 3 months. In startups, it tends to be shorter term. In bigger companies, it's typically quarter or a yearly goal. But you need to be very clear about your own goals also. To have the drive and tie that drive with the clarity of goals, then just you have to go execute on it.
I love the three steps you actually outlined, right? One, you have the drive, and the drive is important no matter where you are, whether it's a
Yep.
startup or a larger company, and the drive changes, so know how it can be executed in the environment. It's different in a larger company, it's different in the startup, so know
Startup, yeah.
that. To execute, but while executing, have a clarity of goals. You talked about this earlier. Always look at the larger goal, tie your work with the larger goal, and have clarity on what you're going to deliver. And three, have absolute clarity on execution on how you're going to get there.
Deliver,
I love
yeah.
the three steps. One thing I wanted to really go into, which is you said in a larger company, you are leading senior people, and some of the times you've had brutal conversations,
Yep.
right? How do you prepare for a conversation like that? Because,
Yeah.
difficult conversations are a big part of leadership roles, whether it is a larger company, smaller company. Leadership comes with difficult conversations. For a people leader who is learning, who's beginning their journey of having these conversations, what would be 2 or 3 skills that you would advise them to really build on?
Yeah, perfect. So there's an advantage of the managing very senior people. They will understand very quickly if why this difficult conversation is happening. It's typically it's a challenge with very entry level engineers, where they may not truly understand the criticality of a situation, whereas experienced people are expected to understand, and generally they do. I mean, it will be very rare to have a case where somebody who's very seasoned doesn't understand if things are going wrong. But when you get into conversation, you have to be honest, right? But ultimately what matters is examples, data, very to the point. And when you're in a senior role, you will have most of the information readily available. You will have support systems which will help you get that information validated very quickly. So you need to have a very solid data that's with you. I've seen it in many cases. My leadership team has told it. I've told it to my teams that, hey, if it is data, let's talk. If it is opinion, only mine counts. So that if you
Yeah.
say that honestly and you live by it, a lot of difficult conversations actually become a little easier. But as a preparatory work, you need to look at the whatever information data that you have and make decisions and give those examples very clearly. Now once that is done, you also need to give feedback. It's not like senior people know all the time what they could have done or what they need to have. This is where someone at a even though at a leadership level, when you set goals for your direct reports, you still need to set goals. You still need to be able to tell them in a certain way what is expected of them, right? The data helps. The information, the data is helping you collect some feedback by talking to other people. You need to network a lot, so it's not only your feedback. It's sort of feedback from others who validate that same feedback. Then you go to this person, share it with them, and also share some ideas on how they can improve. So it is difficult at a senior level, but you have to get brutally honest very quickly. Don't delay it. Don't sugarcoat it. Just be direct, but be data oriented, and be have solutions also for them.
Wow, I love so many things in there. And, especially be honest, be quick, don't delay it,
Yep.
don't sugarcoat it, be direct, have data to back you up. It's not an opinion, it's data. And
And
it's
provide
not
them.
just your data, it's data that you've
Collectors from
observed,
others also. Yeah.
collected from others. I love all those pointers. If somebody, and I'll bring in a cultural element here. I grew up in an environment and culture in a large family. We were never taught to be direct.
Yeah.
Rather, as a matter of fact, being direct was a lot of times considered even not being respectful, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I've dealt with it at work. I'm so familiar with this at workplace. It's amazing what you're saying. I
yeah.
can connect it, and I can give you again very real examples.
Let's dig in. So, what
Yeah.
are some of the ways that you have built the skill of being direct? And also in a cultural context, I'll just add that, right? For some cultures, what is direct could be
Yeah.
very hard for another culture. For some cultures, what is direct can be very sugar coated for another.
Yeah.
So, how do you, one, develop that skill? And
Yeah.
two, how do you adapt to a cultural context?
Yeah, so it's not easy. I think at Citrix, I remember this example. I was managing at a point where I had a team in China, a team obviously in India. There was a team in Greece, a few people in Europe and US. So I had basically
Wow.
a team in every major time zone. And what I remember very distinctly is, if I start from east and I go to the west, the openness of communication and the feedback is increasing. So when I was talking to the team in China, and I've seen this in earlier in some other companies in Juniper in Japan, people don't say a thing. I mean, it's pin drop silence when you speak to them in team
Yeah.
meeting. Be a word uttered at all. India, it will be slightly better. The senior people typically will speak up in India. Usually it's managers who will speak up, or senior engineers, but the junior engineers won't. And when you go to Europe and US, generally I think people are far more vocal, and they will ask questions. So it's very easy. So now, when you want to engage, when you want to hear from your teams in such a setting, you have to adopt tools and techniques which work very well. For sure, China, Eastern countries, India, people will definitely give more feedback in surveys, anonymous surveys especially, but they may not talk to you in a team setting. They may give you more feedback in one-on-one meetings than in a group meeting, for example, right? I've never seen group meeting where people have spoken up. a lot. Whereas if you go to US, for example, even in a casual lunch table, people are giving you pointers, messages. You know, you have to be smart enough to pay attention and see what feedback is being given to you directly and indirectly. But you will get a lot more in terms of people giving you feedback. Then there is a very specific technique which I feel has helped me a lot. Many times we do all hands come team meetings, and at the end of the day, people will say, any questions? Do you have any questions for me? That people don't, when you ask that kind of a thing, right? There is no, yeah, it's yes or no. Do you have any questions? Yes or no. What I learned in one of my coaching things I did was, what questions do you have for me? The moment you change that word or the phrase to what
Love
questions
that.
you have to me, you cannot say yes or no anymore. Somebody usually will speak up for what. So it will trigger a conversation. So it's a technique,
Love
very
that.
specific technique, which I still see many people don't use. It's surprising. I thought it is well known, but actually that helps a lot, a lot. So in my
I
one-on-one,
love that.
for sure, I
Yeah.
ask that question. What questions you have for me? It will make the other team members speak up for sure.
I love that, Sriram. I think open-ended questions, right? What
Yeah,
question do you have for me is such a beautiful way of saying I am open to feedback.
correct.
I am open to hearing how we can work better together.
Mhm.
And that sets a lot of precedence of, giving and receiving feedback
Yeah.
and ability to have a camaraderie in some ways
Mhm.
saying, we are working together. Our success is shared and it's
Yeah.
the same. And I'm here to do that.
Mhm.
Right. I love that question. So thank you for, sharing a very tactical tip. What question do you have for me? Such a
Mhm.
beautiful rephrasing. I also loved, what you said, which is, how you have observed how the
Culture.
openness from global perspective changes, how it is important, one, to be curious. Two, it
Mhm.
is important to be observant. And three, it is important to know what works in what settings, where
Correct.
some places one on ones go better as a mechanism of conversations. In some places, people love sharing their ideas in
Yeah.
public forums.
Mhm.
So, understand those nuances
Yeah.
is really critical, right? And is that the right summary of what you said?
Absolutely.
Right. I really would love to go one step deeper in,
Mhm.
this conversation because I think it's so critical as a people leader, right, to understand this. Um, as a people leader, what are some of the mechanisms that you use to expand your awareness and expand your awareness of cultural nuances? You
Mhm.
talked about, things that work in China, things that work in Japan, things that work in US. How do I equip myself? I'll give you an example. So when I
Mhm.
moved to the United States and started my career journey here, I would actually, even just go and sit in a library for a while
Mhm.
just to observe people to see, how do they say things?
Yeah.
How do they, create sentences?
Yeah.
And how does one create this cultural awareness? What are some of your tools? What are some of the ways you do this?
Yeah, yeah. Again, some of this comes through training. I have been lucky enough to work in companies, global companies, which give that kind of a training to managers, especially new managers and growing managers are given that kind of a training to be aware of cultural differences. And I remember very distinctly, for me, it happened at Infinera, a company called Infinera, where it was a startup, US-based startup, but as we grew the India team, many of us became managers. We were encouraged to learn about these things, even though we are predominantly working with the US, but it was always a good course, good class that some of the managers could attend to understand it. Second, you do, again, most of our work permits travel. Either on your own or business travel is included most of the time. You're transiting through countries. You have to, like you said, observe people, pay attention, right? You have to have, again, the curiosity factor here, how people speak, how people, you have to observe, right? You augment all that by reading books. There are a lot of good books available which can help you, figure that thing out. Most important, in my opinion, and where I learned was from my managers. I think many of my managers, I was lucky enough where almost always I've had managers outside, and I don't think I have any manager in India at all. So I was lucky, but you need to go either your direct manager may be in India, or you have some skip level somewhere in outside India. You figure out a way to learn from them. Many times they visit, you talk to them, find out what is their culture about. They may be from a totally different country. I've had managers from different countries. You need to learn. I think in my opinion, that's the maximum I've learned, because it's a fast track learning, and from somebody who knows that culture very well.
I love that. So, anybody who's starting their journey, pay attention to things, be
Yeah.
curious, be observant of how people react, reach out to somebody in the company, feel empowered
Yeah.
to seek guidance, to seek coaching, to
Yeah.
seek mentoring. All questions are good questions. Get out there, ask questions.
Yeah.
If you can travel, travel. If not, empower yourself about
Yeah.
learning through various tools. I am going to switch gears a little bit
Sure.
into a little bit more of your work. Sriram, you are an insightful person who has written two books on OpenStack Networking Cookbook and Software Defined Network, SDN with OpenStack. You also hold multiple patents in through your career journey, and first of all, I'm so proud of your accomplishments there. There are many technologists who are amazing at technical work. And in my, career as a L&D professional, I've come across many technologists who want to do this kind of work, who are
Mm-hmm.
really good at technology,
Yeah.
who are really the go-to in their teams for what
Mm-hmm.
they do,
Mm-hmm.
and really aspire to write books or
Mm-hmm.
aspire to publish white papers
Yeah.
or aspire to
Right.
patent.
Blogs.
But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and aspire to blog on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. And but often find it, a challenge to transition into that.
Mm-hmm.
What would your advice be for somebody who's looking to build those skills to actually become not just a go-to person in their team, but become the guru of the industry in some
Yeah.
ways be?
Yeah. So first thing is to accept the certain realities, right? I mean, we do our work. We are learning technologies, new technologies. We build features, products, platforms, whatnot. But ultimately, for a career, you need to go articulate what is called as your body of work. And I read this article or a blog long back. I don't know where. I don't know if that article still exists, but it was talking about how do you create or define your body of work, right? I think so. So that made me think, what does it mean? What does body of work mean? So for most people, body of work ends up being what they do in the company. I look at resumes for for a living, literally, and people mention their projects, what they have done, but the standout ones are the ones where people have gone above and beyond their typical work. And this is where I see that opportunities, and these are once in a lifetime opportunity in some sense, to write books, to write blogs, and you have to embrace it. You have to know what is the value of those things. They all add up to your body of work. It's not just what you do at your each and every company in your career, but something outside. Now it may click, it may not click, right? Some people want to do podcasts, some people want to do YouTube videos. They, just like they do experiment at work, set stretch goals, set some time aside, and start doing it. I think they have to just start doing it, then put some system around it. Just like you do look at your work that you do at your job. You have a product manager who gives you some requirements, then you build a product, then you deliver it to customers. When you are writing on your own, when you are blogging on your own, when you are creating your own podcast, you are playing all the roles of a typical, again, I'm from a software background, I'm giving you that analogy. A typical software development life cycle, there are various stages and steps, different stakeholders. When you are doing some independent work, you are doing all those things pretty much on your own.
I
And it's
love
not,
that.
it's just going to take a little bit of extra time. If you truly believe that it will eventually add up to something tangible to your career, you will do it. Now, the next thing is, again, if you carefully think, just like you build a product, you want to go validate product market fit. Initially, you build something, then you want to test it, you want to go talk to customers. You have to figure out, what do I do? What blogs do I write? And you will end up hitting some sweet spots. But you have to stick at it. You have to try it. There was when I started, before writing books, I started writing blogs as one of the things, again, because I like communication, I like writing, I thought, let me write blogs. Somehow I stumbled into a couple of topics which I could not find good material on the internet. And when I wrote those blogs, few months, 6 months, 1 year later, they were in the top 2 or 3 search hits of Google. That was my highlight. So, but again, it takes a lot of effort, and that blogs, and then I started writing more blogs of related topics. Some college professor in Mexico said that I am teaching this course and I'm leveraging your blogs to educate, to give the practical aspects to my students. Students don't learn the industry techniques, and I am learning that from your blogs and helping them. I have no idea who that person is, but he just mentioned I am teaching this course in this university in Mexico, and I'm here sitting here writing blogs in India. So things can happen, but you have to put that effort. That led to somebody else noticing my blogs in a publishing house, and this is the hard pound copy. These are not ebooks. These are regular publishers who publish just like O'Reilly, and it's a different one, Pact. They reached out. They said, "Hey, can you write us a book? We have seen your blogs. Can you suggest some ideas?" So I wrote one book that did well. Then said, "Hey, what about one more book?" It takes a lot of effort to write book,
Yeah.
but it pays off. There is, it's there in the history books. It's so to say, right? That yes, there are 2 books in my name, and it's there in the Library of Congress records somewhere. A name is there forever now. But you have to believe in it. You have to give it a shot, and it adds eventually. All these things, including patents, everything adds to your body of work, and it shows up on your resume directly or indirectly.
I love the idea of thinking about body of work, right? And that is just not what you're doing for a living, but really thinking beyond. It almost sounds like a strategic life plan that you need to make. That's what I
Exactly.
heard from what you
Yeah.
said. And
It's a good way to
also
say it.
believe that, yeah, and also believe that you're your own product,
Yeah. Exactly.
which is you are owning the
Yeah.
end to end of that
Yeah.
development. You own your development, you own your journey.
Grow.
Nobody is going to
Yeah.
give it to on a silver platter. The third thing I heard, the third step I heard is go validate that thought of is
Correct.
there a need?
Uh-huh.
The fourth, put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there. Don't think too much.
Yeah.
Try, test, be agile as you go through the process. Fourth, you never know what comes out of it, but
Yeah.
don't think about the outcome. Keep going
Exactly.
at it. Be
I can,
persistent.
yeah, I can almost say very, very confidently that more people don't do it than they do it. So you'll always stand out. Even if you just try it out, you're going to stand out. So again, I don't see this as a win-loss at all. It's win-win only, because the percentage of people relative to the number of technical, for example, the number of technical people I have interacted with in my career, there are very handful of people who have written a book or who have written a lot of blogs or who are constantly doing something. The percentage is very small. You will stand out. But despite knowing that, people don't put in the effort because it takes extra time. It takes effort, for sure.
I love that. You said there is only win-win in this.
Yeah.
And you are building your personal body of work. You're improving your branding
Yeah.
as you do this work and as you gain confidence in trying and testing. So it's not the number of likes don't matter, because
Nothing
we
matters.
are in an era of, instant gratification. We are
Correct.
in an era, it's hard. We are in a data
Yeah.
driven era, and it's like, oh, there's
Yes.
only 10. Am I successful? So don't think about that, but try and keep going, because this is going to ultimately add to your body of work. Sriram, I know I can go on with our conversations because they are so fun and so interesting.
I'm enjoying
I
to. Yeah.
am yeah, I am going to dive into what I call the rapid fire. The intention is to have fun. I'll ask you 5 questions. The 5 questions, approximately about a minute each to answer. I'm
Okay.
not going to put you on a timer, but I will do
Could be
my
rapid.
best
Yeah.
to keep it rapid,
Yeah.
rapid-ish, if I can say,
Sure.
right? Okay, question one. Looking back, what's one skill you didn't know you needed, but you really wish your 20-year-old self, when you first started your career in, a global context, would require? What would your advice to your 20-year-old self be today?
Yeah. I think listening skill. Yes. Listening
Listening
skill is
skill?
something. Yeah. So developing good listening skills. from an early age would have been very helpful. It's still hard. I think
Mm.
it's probably the hardest skill even for me, because it's when you get more experienced and you are in positions leadership where you are expected to have a lot of answers. It's very easy to speak, very easy to answer questions before somebody else is saying something, because generally what to talk. But I feel that listening skill is something which is underrated, unfortunately, and something that is hard to develop, because it's not easy to pick up. Sometimes your ego comes into the way. But I think listening skill is something I would, if I could go back and learn, I would pick up that as a first skill early on in my career.
I love that listening skill. So let's get into the second question. What are pro tips for somebody who is beginning or wanting to develop listening skill?
So again, these are all techniques I've learned. Pause,
Absolutely.
always pause and answer. Never, the first thought usually that comes to my mind. Many people will tell you that's the right answer, but I feel it's the wrong answer. So always pause, calibrate a little before answering, because and even in a conversation, when somebody is saying something and you ask a question, and the other person has not answered, the pause makes a huge difference for sure.
Heavy hitter,
Yeah.
yes.
There's a reason why they call it the pregnant pause. It's important. People will speak up. It will, if you keep quiet a little bit, it will get covered with somebody else, and that's usually the response you are waiting for.
And it's hard because sometimes silence is very unearthing, right? It's like
Correct.
that that whole room being silent is not an
Who
easy
goes first?
feeling. And
Correct.
yeah, exactly. And then that feeling of, oh my God, what's going on? So it's a
Correct.
lot of skills
Yeah.
when you bring that pause to life. I
Yeah.
love that. Third question for you. What's the one super skill that you have?
I would say my communication skills. I would say couple that with a bit of an empathy, on, like I said, about connecting people to their careers, to their jobs. You have to sometimes let people know they're going in the right direction, not going in the right direction, but doing it in a more humane way so that they understand. But if you have to boil it down to one skill, it's communication skill at the end of the day.
I love you. You called communication skills your superpower from the start, and you brought in empathy. What is one pro tip for somebody who is wanting to develop empathetic communications, which you just talked about?
Yeah. Again, I'll go back to the previous answer. Develop listening skills. It'll help you.
Mm.
You need to let people you are speaking with or communicating with speak up more than what you say. It's far, you again, as leaders, especially as senior team members, many times your words carry weight. So the lesser you say, the better. But the few things that you say should, you know, drive the communication in a certain way, right? You want communication to be going in a certain direction. You need to say it in lesser and lesser words.
So less is more.
Yep.
Listen, listen, listen.
Mhm. And give people a
Pause
chance to, yeah, speak.
and create an environment of
Yeah.
speaking up. Really shifting a little bit gear in my fourth question, Sriram. I know you are an avid animal lover and
Uh-huh.
activist, and you got soft spot for dogs, cats, and many
That's, yeah.
animals. Uh, what's one skill or trait that you admire the most about them, and what do you think we as humans can learn from that?
God, it's an easy answer. We overrate our brains. I think uh, I think it's a blessing and a curse. I think animals need far little to be happy, and human beings don't. There's nothing that can satisfy human beings. I wish we are more satisfied with whatever we have, and that's something. If I can learn something from animals, that would be the easiest one.
I love that. So we overrate our brains, go with the
Yeah,
flow, just like the animals do. Don't take yourself that
too soon.
seriously all the time. I love that. Last question for you, Sriram. You read a wide range of books and consume wide range of content. If you could have dinner with a fictional character or a historical figure, who would that be, and what would you ask them?
Very interesting question. Actually, the first answer that came to my mind is Alexander.
Oh,
Simply
what's
because
that?
again, he very young, very talented, traveled, fought over. miles from his origin country all the way to India border, and then one of those big kings that people will always remember. So
Yeah.
that's one character I would say. I wouldn't say fictional, real
Historical.
character, historical. Yeah,
That and Alexander is the one you say Alexander the Great, right? There
yeah,
are not many
absolutely.
who you
There
say
are not
X
many.
the Great. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's not many who say
Yeah,
X the
the other
Great.
one, I think, again, a few, I would say, few scientists, space explorers. I'm fascinated by space, whatever's happening.
I love that. Let's go with Alexander the Great. What was the question? What is the question you would ask Alexander the Great?
Easiest question: what motivated you to start this journey for such a long, far away from your home, all the way? What was driving you? And how did you approach every challenge? Because that whole journey of going and fighting battles, winning so many of them, everywhere he would have met a whole bunch of challenges. He would have had to adapt, evolve. I'm sure there will be a lot of leadership learnings. Being young and leading a large army going across the kind of continents practically would have required him to do a lot of things right. So I would use that to pick his brains on his leadership skills.
I love that. I can almost see, Sriram, you writing a book from that saying leadership lessons learned through Alexander's journey
Yeah,
or something like that.
some
Maybe that's the
correct.
next book for you to
Next book,
write.
who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way you connected your curiosity to a historic character and made that a learning opportunity. Sriram, this has been such a fun conversation with you. I learned a lot. I hope everybody watching, listening to this enjoys every bit of learning from this. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for all your insights and honesty in the conversation.
Thanks, Purnima. Thanks a lot for inviting me to your podcast. Wish you the best. Hope it's very successful. And I know you have been on your own journey. We have discussed about it a lot. I hope this new phase brings you a lot more success and have fun doing it.
Thank you. I so deeply appreciate that, and I look forward to many more career in progress conversations with you as well.
Sure.